Hey USL League One fans, Alex here from League One Updater. Today we're going to do lineup previews for our 2023 opening match, North Carolina FC and South Georgia Tormenta FC. Today is January 30th, 2023, which means that there are 46 days until USL League One opening day. Currently, we have the teams playing on opening day as our number 1 and number 2 in our power rankings. North Carolina FC, of course, is number 1. Their lineup is ridiculous. And then I moved Tormenta FC up to number 2 this week based on some of their signings. So, North Carolina FC retained most of its core roster from 2022 and then added some pretty big names in free agency. Tormenta FC, meanwhile, did shed a few of their core members of the championship squad, but they made a few key additions and still have arguably the best striker in the league in Cos Sterling. We'll go through the predicted opening day starting 11 for both clubs. First up is North Carolina FC, who decided they were not done adding offensive star power to their roster when they added Luis Perez, an unsigned refugee out of FC Tucson. How Perez was not signed yet is beyond me, especially with multiple clubs in need of such a playmaking midfielder. But NCFC won that lottery, or else they opened up their wallets and made it worth his while. The clip we have here looping, if you're watching on YouTube, is from September 11th, 2022. Storm-delayed match against Union Omaha, hence the lack of fans in the stands. But this goes down as the fastest goal in USL League One's short history, a Tarnweer goal at the 7-second mark. But if you watch, it is fed by none other than Luis Perez on an amazing assist. It was one of 7 assists tallied by Perez in 2022 with FC Tucson. So, with Luis Perez in mind, let's play around with the potential lineup for opening day. First, let's just say that, just repeat, NCFC has an absolutely silly front line in a 4-2-3-1 setup, and they should always have an ace in the hole. We'll get to that in a minute. We set up an opening day 11 with Garrett McLaughlin up front. Garrett had 14 goals in 2022, and with my totally made up expected goals calculation, I would expect at least 12 in 2023. At least being the key word here, because in 2022 he had 14 with a young utility wing and midfield squad, and now he will have the likes of Rafa Mensingen and Luis Perez, along with Alex Anderson and Shaq Adams. That's ridiculous. Meanwhile, let's talk about Rafa. Rafa came to NCFC by way of Chattanooga Red Wolves, where he had 8 goals and 4 assists as part of one of the best offensive squads in the league. Should we put him down for another 8 goals this year? I don't know. This year, he will make up the left side of NCFC's attack. And if you're watching on YouTube, there's a loop playing of Rafa putting the nail in the coffin against Richmond in the semifinals of 2022. Sorry, Kickers fans. I'm one of you, but this is I think this is probably the goal of the year for Chattanooga, and certainly one of the biggest ones of Rafa's career. Okay, so we have McLaughlin at striker and Alex Anderson backing him up at attacking center midfield. Rafa on the left, Louis on the right. Oh, and on the bench, just Shaq Adams, who I think he can play left or right and is even featured at center. He's the ace in the hole. He will probably rotate in and out, replacing any one of these people in the front at any time needed. Probably have a few starts early on too. Yeah, that's a crazy offense. Midfield, we're going to go with defensive midfielder Pekka on the left and defensive midfield on the right. We're going to go with Mikey Maldonado. This is another position where there is some serious depth. Raheem Summersall, even Christian Lu Young. Either of those could swap out with Mikey. say have Mikey at defensive right back and move Lu Young up to defensive midfielder, or have Summersall there with Mikey in the back. Gustavo Fernandez is another who could swap into any of these positions. Let's just say that Coach Bradford has the assets to get creative here. Backfield, we're going to go with Nelson Flores Blanco at left back, a spot he claimed for a good part of 2022. Newcomers Navarro and DJ Benton take over in the middle, while Christian Lu Young takes over his spot on the left. But like I said, that right spot has some serious depth. And of course, we're going to go with Nick Holiday in goal to start the season. You have to feel like the club is going to want to show him off in case those transfer talks become reality. And Tor Saunders is not a bad backup to have just in case. But what about North Carolina FC's opening day opponent, defending champions Tormenta FC? Just don't start a conversation about Tormenta FC's lineup without starting with Keziah Sterling. Shown here, if you're watching on the YouTube, scoring against NCFC back in May. Of course, two of the players assisting that goal are no longer on the squad. Gabriel Cabral moved up to Miami FC, and Adrian Billhart moved to Detroit City, both of the USL Championship. But Sterling put up 17 goals last year and finished the regular season just behind Emiliano Terzaghi of Richmond in the regular season Golden Boot race. But Sterling wasn't finished and put up 4 goals in the USL League One playoffs, leading his club to the championship. Of course, we'll start Sterling up front in this 4-2-3-1 setup. We're going to leave Bosua on the bench since we don't quite know if he's recovered from his ACL injury. So we're going to go with Mateus Cassini at attacking midfield center. Cassini put up 5 goals and 5 assists with Forward Madison last year and would be expected to fill an Adrian Billhart-sized hole there. We'll move Kingsford Ajay to the left, which was his spot during the championship match, and bring in Pedro Fonseca to the right. Fonseca also put up 7 goals and 3 assists with Real Monarchs in MLS Next Pro last year, so he fits in real nicely with this crew. Ajay had a breakout season with Tormenta in 2022, where the New York City FC draft pick put up 7 goals. He also plays that attacking center midfield spot, but we're going to have to remain creative until Bosua returns, and which we should know as practice and preseason begin shortly. But as we saw last year, and if you're watching on YouTube, there is a highlight looping of I believe that's a Sterling to Ajay goal against Chattanooga. But he is more than capable of attacking from the left side. For defensive midfielders, we're going to go with Chris Heckenberg and Tobias Otieno. Tormenta doesn't quite have the depth yet there, but Heckenberg basically replaces Cabral right now in the existing lineup. And then on the back line, the club lost a couple of mainstays in Curtis Thorne and Joshua Phelps, but they seem to have done a good job finding at least one replacement in Preston Kilween. And then, but for right back, I guess we have to go with untested first-time pro Colin Makianis by default. He's the only one who plays right back. I'd expect another signing there possibly today after this recording goes down, so we might need to discuss that next week. But in goal, they just re-signed TJ Bush last week. We're going to have to go with him for the way he played in the home stretch or last season. I'm not sure about anyone else, but with the lack of unsigned keepers at a lot of other clubs, I kind of expected him to walk in free agency. I'm sure this is a big relief for Tormenta fans to have him back after the way he played. I think I read that the club went 8-3-3 down the stretch during his time as the main starter with 5 clean sheets. Not bad. So that's going to be our opening day preview. Should be an exciting one down there in Cary to start the USL League One season. We will get to see if NCFC's new and improved band of USL League One stars is the real deal, or if Tormenta's returning core can find a way to exploit any weaknesses that come with building a new and improved club like that, with so many new players on their first regular season match together. So Friday, March 17th in Cary, North Carolina FC versus South Georgia Tormenta FC. Be there. Okay, really quickly, let's run through the power rankings. Of course, we mentioned NCFC being on top due to the Luis Perez signing on top of their already crazy roster depth. Tormenta FC moves up based on the signings of Pedro Fonseca and Preston Kilween and the re-sign of TJ Bush. Greenville remains just slightly behind, I think based on their untested goalie situation versus Tormenta having TJ Bush and Pablo Jara. Richmond Kickers moved down just because they did not have any signings that fill their major needs last week, like a playmaking midfielder. I know some Richmond fans were hoping for Luis Perez, but the rivals to the south won that one. One Knox moves up with the addition of Derek Waldick to fill out their first team starting 11 with a solid group of veterans from across various leagues. Forward Madison bumps down one because they didn't make any announcements last week, but they still have a solid core, except for in goal, where they have no one. I halfway expected the club to poach TJ Bush, but oh well, sorry Flamingos. Union Omaha moves one place up after re-signing Connor Doyle and adding Luca Mastrotonio and Marco Milanesa. And shout out to Union Omaha for providing pronunciation guides for their players, by the way. That's huge. Charlotte moves down one. They only made one announcement last week, the return of keeper Austin Pack, so at least they have a keeper now. They still need to build around this core, which is a great core, but they can't carry it all. Lexington made a whole bunch of additions last week, but we hold them at number 9 because we still don't know how this group will mesh. As we mentioned before, Lexington seems to be building for the long term as opposed to Knoxville's compete right now mentality. Don Smart was a good add, though. If anything, there's some serious veteran leadership right off the bat. We're also going to wait and see with the Red Wolves and their new roster. They lost a vast majority of their goal scorers from last year, but they have actually ended up with a fairly impressive but yet untested rebuild. Hailstorm landed forward Billy King, who had somewhat of a comeback year in the Irish Premier League last year. I think he'll make a fine addition to their front line, but the club still needs some more defenders. And then there's Fuego FC, who did not make any announcements. Last week we asked, is it time to be worried? This week we're just saying it, we're worried about you, Fuego. What's going on over there in Fresno? Hopefully some news this week. There are quite a number of decent free agents remaining. There's also the entire remaining refugee list from FC Tucson, if all else fails. Sorry, Tucson. Hey, USL League One fans, that'll do it for today. Hit me up on Twitter, like, subscribe, all that. Thanks for watching and listening, and thank you for all your great content last week, especially Protagonist Soccer, River City 93, Knox Soccer Podcast, Who Gives a Hoot, and Crane Kicks Lex, all of whom found their way onto my my rankings and various different contents this week. Give them all a listen, read, a follow, all your likes. And until next time, don't let Wrexham live rent-free in your heads. See ya.